Grace in the New Testament, as we've just seen, is not only God's disposition to do good to us when we don't deserve it, often defined as unmerited favor, totally right definition, but it's more. The grace of God is not just God's disposition to do good to the undeserving. It is that. But now we've seen it's power. Grace is power. Grace moves in and enables me to fulfill a resolve. Now, want to see this confirmed? Here's a verse. Verse 10 of 1 Corinthians 15 goes like this. By the grace of God, I am what I am. And His grace toward me was not in vain. On the contrary, I worked. Now, you could paraphrase that from 1 Thessalonians by saying, I turned many resolves into deeds. Couldn't you? I mean, that'd be the same thing. I worked. So, by the grace of God, this grace came to me, and it was not in vain, but I worked. Many of my resolves, many of Paul's resolves to suffer for Christ and plant the church and get in prison and endure beatings, they came to reality by grace, he's saying. Grace did that. I worked harder than any of them, but it was not I, but the grace of God that was with me. So I would base my whole sermon and life on that verse insofar as life is a dependence on the power of grace to be what we ought to be and do what we ought to do. By the grace of God, I am what I am. His grace toward me was not in vain, but I worked. But when I worked, it wasn't I. It was grace with me. That's pretty clear, I think. Grace is the key. The power of grace moving into our lives, turning our resolves into hard work that's free and joyful and satisfying and the last thing from legalistic. Grace doesn't produce legalism. It's grace. And it produces hard work. Christians aren't lazy because grace is